Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Because, it is just wonderful to be back in Oregon, and over the last 15 months we've traveled to every corner of the United States. I've now been in 57 states. The very first promise I made on this campaign was that as president, I will sign a universal health care plan into law by the end of my first term in office.
Barack Obama said this week that he's tried drugs and apparently got a mention in the newspaper.
Which of you are ready to admit to having used marijuana in the past? And they want us to go around and ask each of you. Senator McCary, yes or no? Yes. Okay. Senator Edwards? Yes.
Which brings us up to this week and Barack Obama.
Look, when I was a kid, I inhaled frequently. That was the point. I mean, think about it. Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, these countries are tiny compared to the Soviet Union. They don't pose a serious threat to us. Iran in particular poses a great challenge. It builds a nuclear program, supports terrorism, and threatens Israel with destruction. They don't pose a serious threat to us. Iran in particular poses a great challenge.
Coalition and Iraqi security forces have achieved progress in the security arena. A premature drawdown of our forces would likely have devastating consequences. That a rapid withdrawal would result in the further release of the strong centrifugal forces in Iraq and produce a number of dangerous results. Including a high risk of disintegration of the Iraqi security forces, rapid deterioration of local security initiatives, Al-Qaeda Iraq regaining lost ground and freedom of maneuver.
But our drawdown should proceed at a steady pace of 1 or 2 brigades each month. When we start now, all our brigades should be out of Iraq by the end of next year.
A marked increase in violence and further ethno-sectarian displacement and refugee flows.
All our brigades should be out of Iraq by the end of next year.
Alliances of convenience by Iraqi groups with internal and external forces to gain advantages over their rivals, and exacerbation of already challenging regional dynamics, especially with respect to Iran.
The central front in the war against terror is not Iraq.
They remain a very, very dangerous foe, an adaptable foe, and one that again wants to retain sanctuaries in Iraq and to continue to inflict enormous death and destruction on the Iraqi people.
What I've also said is that I will always listen to the commanders on the ground.
And that a premature drawdown of our forces would likely have devastating consequences.
And to immediately begin to remove our combat troops, not to
that a premature drawdown of our forces would likely have devastating consequences.
What I've also said is that I will always listen to the commanders on the ground. I had a uncle who was one of the who was part of the first American troops to go into Auschwitz and liberate the concentration camps.
Obama didn't have an uncle who served in the U.S. Army. Second, Russian forces liberated the Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland in January of 1945. There is no record of U.S. forces entering Auschwitz because it remained in Russian hands as part of Russian-occupied Poland after the war.
I've got 2 daughters, 9 years old and 6 years old. I'm going to teach them, first of all, about values and morals. But if they make a mistake, I don't want them punished with a baby. I don't want them punished with a baby. I don't want them punished with a baby.
His vote on abortion had been pro-abortion on demand. He's against the ban on partial birth abortion, where you puncture the skull in the 8th or 9th month to deliver the baby. You puncture the skull in the 8th or 9th month to deliver the baby. You puncture the skull in the 8th or 9th month to deliver the baby.
And that had I heard them, had I been sitting in the church at the time that they were spoken, I would have been absolutely clear to Reverend Wright that I didn't find those acceptable. Did I ever hear him make remarks that could be considered controversial while I sat in the church? Yes. A policy where all we look for are reasons to stay in Iraq while we spend billions of dollars a month on a war that isn't making the American people any safer.
Failure in Iraq would diminish our nation's standing, undermine national security, lead to massive humanitarian casualties, and increase the threat of another terrorist attack on our homeland. If we fail in Iraq, Al-Qaeda would claim a propaganda victory of colossal proportions, and they could gain safe havens in Iraq from which to attack the United States and our friends and allies. Iran would seek to fill the vacuum in Iraq, which would embolden Tehran's radical leaders and fuel their ambitions to dominate the region. The Taliban in Afghanistan and Al-Qaeda in Pakistan would grow in confidence and boldness.
In case you missed it, this week there was a tragedy in Kansas. 10,000 people died. An entire town destroyed.
Well, the Democratic presidential candidate got one part right. An entire town was destroyed, but it was not 10,000 people that died. 12 people died.
On this Memorial Day, as our nation honors its unbroken line of fallen heroes, I see many of them in the audience here today.
Both Senator McCain and I have traveled recently to the areas that have been devastated by floods, and I know that Senator McCain felt as strongly as I did, feeling enormous sympathy for the victims of the recent flooding. And I'm sure they appreciated the sentiment, but they probably would have appreciated it even more if Senator McCain hadn't opposed legislation to fund levees and flood control programs, which he considers pork. Shortly after Obama's speech, the McCain campaign lashed out, saying the Illinois senator opposed and even voted against a bipartisan effort in the Senate by McCain, Sens. Russ Feingold, D. Wisconsin, and Claire McCaskill, D. Missouri, to ensure that levees were fixed first.